So in our last video we have created the UI for our chatbot, and now in this video we are going to send messages from our frontend to our backend and use OpenAI's API in order to show prompt messages to our user. So let's do that. First of all, let's go to our component, and inside our chatbot container let's move these headers, message box container as well as the footer which has the input and button to a separate components. So let's do that first. So let's create a component called header first, or we can call it chatbot header, and create JSX for it. We will create a React functional component for this and move our logic for the header inside this. Let's format our code and save this. We can now import this header over here. And use this. Let's save this. Similarly, what we can do is we can move this, our message container, from here to inside our another component that we can create right now, and let's call it message box container. Let's call it chatbot message container. We'll create a JSX for it and also a React functional component similarly, and move this entire logic from here to inside our container. Let's format our code and save this, but this will not work till now since we have some styles over here. So let's create a CSS file for it as well. Let's copy the name of our package, create a CSS file for it. We can now move the CSS from our previous CSS file. Let's cut it from here and we will save it inside the component that we have created right now. So inside this we will import the styles like we always do, import styles from the CSS file. So this should work as it worked before. Let's close this. Also we will be importing our message box container over here, so let's do that as well. Let's save this, and now let's move our input and button from here to another component. Let's collapse this and create a new component and call it chatbot footer. For now I cannot think of a meaningful name, so let's go with it. We will create a JSX for it, and inside this JSX we will move our input element. First of all, let's create a React functional component and we will save this after formatting. After this we will be using props in order to manipulate some actions, so let's do that afterwards. And first of all, let's check if our UI is working perfectly fine. We'll also import the footer over here. And call it over here. Let's clean the code and save it. So this looks much better right now, and it's a good approach to use components whenever possible. I'll also comment the styles file since we are not using it right now. If we need it later on, we will use it, and if we don't need it entirely, we will delete it later on along with its CSS file. So let's start our project and see if everything works as it worked before. So our UI looks perfectly fine like it used to be before, nothing has changed. Let's go back there and write the logic for sending messages and storing them in a list. We also have a warning over here that we are using the word class instead of class name somewhere. So let's search in our project where we are doing so. Let's search for class is equals to, and we can see that we are using it in our chatbot footer. Let's go here and fix this. We'll save this, and with this it should work perfectly fine with no errors. Let's start this once again, and I hope everything works fine now. Yeah, so there is no warning now. This is a good practice to solve as much warnings and errors as possible while in development. So now we'll go inside our chatbot container root component, and over here we'll create a state. First of all, let's create a state for all messages, and we will call it messages for now. And it would be of type array. Also, we'll be having a state for message. The message user will be writing in the prompt. So let's do that as well. One is a list of messages and one is message. It would be a simple string and it would be empty initially. So let's save this. Now we will have two methods. First is in order to handle the user input, as well as another method in order to handle the submit button, so that when the user types in a message and submits it, we will send the message to our chat prompt. So let's start by creating the function for input handler. Also there will be another method, so let's do that as well. Inside our on input change handler, we will first of all write event.prevent default. It is not necessary, but it's a good practice to use this. We'll be writing constant message is equals to, and we'll take the target value. Once you're done with this, use set message in order to set this message. Also in our on submit user message, what we'll be doing is we will be creating a new object and write it new message. Inside this we will be having three properties. First is user type. So this is a user who is typing the message, so we'll give it a type of user, and the message would be the message we have in our state, so we can type this message, and it's a shortcut. In case you don't want to specify the value, you can use this way. In order to use a default value, since it has the same name as the state, it would automatically be mapped to this key. Also, to be specific, we can use message.trim to trim any empty spaces, and we will use created at in order to store the time at which this message has been sent. We'll store this and we'll create a state and mutate it. So we'll name it updated messages and destruct this first, and then pass in our new message over here. Once this is done, we will store our messages in the state. So let's call set messages for that and store the updated messages over here. Also, when the user has sent the message, we will set the message box to empty. So let's do that as well. We'll set the message to empty. And after doing this, we will call our backend API. So for now, we'll simply write it as a to do. We'll be doing it once we connect our functions for input change handler and on submit user message handler to our footer, and then we'll be calling the API in order to connect the chatbot. Let's now connect the message and input handler. We'll connect the input change handler to footer, since our input is in the footer, and also the submit button. So this is done. We'll also be passing the messages to our message container so that the list of messages can be shown. So let's do that as well. Format the code and save this. Now going inside our footer, we'll grab these properties first of all. So let's do that once. Let's format the code, save this. And now we'll connect our on input change handler to our input, and we'll use on change event for it. Also, we'll connect our on submit user message handler to our button over here using on click. and we will disable this button if there is no message. So let's pass the message as well over here. We will also pass the message over here and take the value of message in the props, and we will make it disabled if there is no message. Let's format this and save this. And now we will also connect the value of the message to the input. So we will make the value is equals to message and save this. Also let's check if the use state is imported, since we see a warning over here. Let's go and import use state from React first. Save this and see if the error appears. No, it's successfully running. And on our UI I can write it and I can submit it, but I have not connected my messages array to this message box over here. So let's do that as well. So going back to our message box container, I'll close the footer for now. So going back to our message box container, I'll be getting the messages as props over here, and I'll be looping over them using map. So let me do that first. Inside my container, I'll be calling messages.map, and I'll be receiving two things over here. First is the message, and second thing is the index of it. Let's call it message index, and we'll be returning a UI element over here, and we will be doing this conditionally. So in case if it's a user, we will showing the message on the right side, and if it is a bot message, then we will be showing it on the left side. I'll be doing it conditionally, so let me do that now. I'll be returning a div based on if it's a message dot user type, and if it is equals to user, in that case I'll be using this message box as a receiver, and if it's not the case, I'll be using this one, which is for the bot. Let me format the code and explain it to you once again. So I have made a condition over here that I will loop over the messages, and each message that I will get based on this condition, if the message dot user type that we will be getting from our message, if it's equal to user, in that case we will be showing the message on the right side, and in the other case we will be showing the message on the left side. So you can confirm that each new message that we will be writing, we will be having a user type of user, and we will be using user type of bot for the chatbot message, which we will be doing later on. So let's do this, and we will also show the message by using message.message. So let me write that over here, message.message, and also for here I'll be doing the same thing. We can also do this other way, which is by adding the CSS dynamically over here if the user message is of type user. So we'll be keeping it this way, even though we can use some conditional classes over here based on user type and show them over here instead of writing two separate div. But for explanation purpose, I am leaving it like this, since we have two different classes over here for receiver message and sender message. Even though we don't have the styles for them right now, we might have them later on if in condition we add some images or some other text over there. But that's a case I am explaining you that we can add some conditional styles over here dynamically, like we did in the socket.io chapter. We will also add the key over here. So let me add the key by using key is equals to message index. Similarly over here, and let me format and save this. And now if I close it, everything should work fine on the UI. And now if I go back on my UI and type in some message, so you can see that the message has been stored, and you can see that the messages are on the right side only, and they are not on the left side, since we don't have the chatbot message yet, which we'll be getting soon. And let me try by typing some more messages. So everything works fine, we are sending the messages, and let me now connect the chatbot API by writing it first. In order to write the API, let's first go to src folder, under that go to pages, and under that go to API, and we can delete this hello.js or you can rename it, but for now I would just simply delete it. and I will create a new API for it and call it ChatBot.js, and I'll create a function over here and call it ChatBot handler. It will have two arguments. First one is request and second one is response. And we will be using fetch in order to send our request to OpenAI. And for that, let's create the configuration and header first so that we can use it efficiently in our fetch request. We'll create a config first, or let's call it HTTP config. It will have a property called headers. Inside this, we will have another object which will have a property called authorization as a key, and the value would start with bearer. Now since we already have our OpenAI secret key, we will be calling process.environment by using process.env and writing the OpenAI key that we have. We can also call fetch on our client side and use this AI API key, but we are not going to do that, so that our OpenAI secret key remains safe and no one can intercept that on our client side, and our server will help us in doing that by hiding that on the server side instead of exposing them on the client side. So let me call this HTTP config inside our chatbot handler. But first of all, let's analyze the request and see if the request.method is post. So if the method is post, we will then only allow the user to send a message request. Another thing that we will need is an OpenAI URL so that we can send the message to the right endpoint. We'll learn how we can get that OpenAI URL endpoint where we'll be sending our chatbot messages and getting the right prompt message. Let's first create the constant for it, and at the later point of time we will use ChatGPT official website in order to find the API endpoint and connect it to our application. We'll call it OpenAI API and give it an empty string for now. And also let's fix this spelling over here. We will also have an OpenAI training model that we will be using. So let's write it over here, OpenAI model. And we'll also give it as an empty string for now, and let's close this. And inside our conditional post method, we'll be calling fetch, and to this fetch we will be providing our OpenAI API endpoint. So let's pass that, and another argument that it will be having is the configuration for our HTTP. So let's first use the configuration that we have created, as well as we will be using method of type post. So let's add over here, and the body that we will be having is the request.body that the user will send. So let's add it over here, and we'll use promise then and then response, so that when the response is received we will take appropriate action and send the response to our client side. Also we'll be using catch method in order to catch any errors that might occur during the application at runtime. And inside our response there would be lot many properties, but we will just use response.data property in order to send the data back to our client side, and we will return the data by using response dot first of all set status, and we will set status to 200 in case everything works perfectly fine. And we will also use JSON method in order to send the data in JSON format. We will give it a property of data and return response.data first. Also we will give it a boolean value, so showing that the message was sent successfully. Similarly, in case of an error, we will be showing data as error and we will be returning success as false. So based on success, if it's not true, then we will be showing that there is an error message and use error property in order to show some data. So with that being set up, we are missing one detail that is valuable for us, which is OpenAI API endpoint in order to send this message and receive the right message from the chat. So let's do that by going to OpenAI's official website. So to get our API endpoint for the chatbot, let's first go to platform.openai.com, and over here you will find that there are a lot of examples, and we will go with the first one, which is the chat. Once you click it, you will find that there is a configuration for Python. Since we are using React, we will be searching for JavaScript implementation, and you can do that. You have to go at the top first, and over here you will find a guide that explains how you can make API calls for chat based language model. Let's open this link, and over here you will find that there is a link of type post, and this endpoint will be used in order to receive the chat prompt messages. You can also use it to directly use ChatGPT and get some messages for your users, but we only need them to answer the restricted method, so we'll learn how we can customize that. But let's first see how we can use this API. So if I go down there, so over here under create chat completion, you can see that there are a number of fields. One is temperature. Temperature shows that the variation of message should be close to 0 or 2. So this number means that if it is a 0, it would only show realistic messages which are exactly right, and if the number is greater than 0, then the amount to which it is greater. So the temperature field tells you how much random your answer would be that you will be receiving from this endpoint, and a number 0 means that your answer would be least random and would be more precise to the question that you are asking, and the number that is 2 would show any random message that is close to what you have asked. So let's first grab this endpoint and add it to our application under OpenAI API, and we will paste it over here. Also, we need the OpenAI model that we would be using in order to send our chatbot messages. So let's get back to our browser and see which AI model we should use. So if we go back to our API references, you can see that the official link that we used first, which was chat completion, here it says that you have to use GPT 3.5 turbo model in order to use this GPT chat completion, and simply we will be copying this from here and pasting it in our model constant. We will add it over here and paste it. And now in order to use this model along with our API, we need to customize our request that we will be receiving from the front end. So let's create a request model over here inside our post. We'll call it request data, and in order to get that, we'll be using request body first. And here we will be receiving a single message from our front end. So let's grab that inside an object and cover that inside an array, and also we'll be destructing this body so that we only have one message as a single object. And as per our OpenAI's reference, we can see that there are three properties that we need to use. First one is the model, which would be our OpenAI model we have mentioned at the top, and we'll be using it over here. Second property is messages, and the third property is temperature. And for now we will be using temperature as 0 so that we receive only the precise data that we need. Let's save this, and now inside our body we will be using request data instead of request body. So let's replace that over here in our fetch request. So with that being done, our backend is almost ready, and what we will be doing is at the front end we will be writing our prompt message and send the request to backend, and based on the response that we received from our backend we will be adding that into our message list. So let's get back to our front end by closing this file and going back to our components, and inside components we will go to chatbot container, and now here we will be using some constants so that we will be refining and restricting our users to ask questions only from those domains and get the answers only from our answer domain. And if the user asks question out of those question domains or answer domains, we will not be answering the user, or we will be showing them an appropriate message so that they can understand that they have to ask questions within our domain. So let's create the domains first. We will create first question domain. It would be an array and a list of messages would be there inside it. So let's add that later, and first let's create the answer domain as well. So the questions that the user can ask in this application would be something like, who are you? Second question the user can ask is, what is this course for? Third question the user can ask is, what is AI? And I think that's it to start with. Let's add comma over here. And the answers that user can receive is, for who are you? It will receive, I am a Udemy based instructor, or let's say I am Udemy's AI based support system. Let's enclose that in double quotes. And the answer for what is this course, we can write this is a Udemy course in Next.js. Also for third answer, what is AI? We can simply write AI means artificial intelligence. So this will alone yet not do anything. We'll be needing a proper prompt in order to send this message to our ChatGPT API and get the right results. So for that we'll be creating an anonymous function, or we can say a function that we'll be calling prompt. It will be receiving an argument, let's say message, and then based on the message we will be sending a return message. And we can customize our prompt like this: if the question is related to, and here we want the user to answer a question only in the question domain, so we'll be using question domain, and we'll be joining all the questions by using comma. So if that's the case, we will tell it to answer it from our answer domain. Let's format this, but before that let's add one more line where the user question is. We will be writing the message that user has written over here. Let's format this in different lines. Now it's more readable. Also we'll say that if that's not a case, else you will say please try some other question. Let's also fix this minus over here. It should be an is equals to. So let's confirm if our prompt looks sensible. So if the question is related to our question domain, the questions would be from these three. In that case, answer it from our answer domain. Answer domain would be this, joined by a comma list. Also we'll say that the user question is this, and if that's not a case, if this condition is not true, you will say that please try some other question. So with that, our prompt should look perfectly fine, and now we will be calling our backend API in order to send this message and receive an appropriate result for it. So let's do that over here where we have written our comment for to do. We will use fetch to send our API request to ChatBot, and the second argument will be first of all method, and we have to send a method of type post, and the body will contain the message, and our message would contain two properties. First of all is the role, and here we will be having a role of type user. So let's take that from our new message dot user type. Also we will write another property as content, and the content will be new message dot message. We are using this in accordance with our OpenAI's reference API, which you can confirm by going back to the API reference that we have taken. Over here on the official website, you can see that we can send messages as an array, which we have done on our backend. We are only sending one message with a property of role type user, as well as the content would be the message that the user will be typing in. So let's get back to our Visual Studio Code. Before sending a message, we will be using prompt in order to convert our message to an appropriate prompt message. Let's save this. We will then wait for the response that we will be receiving, and we will also have the catch method. which will give us the error in case there is an error. We'll simply log the error for now. And we will also log the response that we will be receiving. Let's now save this and go back to our UI. Before that, we have a minor error over here, so let's fix that first in our prompt. We don't need a semicolon over here, so let's save this and see if the application is running fine. Let's check the UI. Let's start by typing some message. So we don't see a message over here since we have not mapped our response to our messages, but let's see what appears on the console. You can see that we don't receive the response in a format that we needed. Also, if we inspect our network, you can see that the success message is true, but the body is not having the data property. So let's check why is that a case. Inside our backend code, you can see that we have this request.body over here, but we are not using json.stringify or json.parse since we are using the fetch request, and this is not getting the data in proper format. So let's fix that by first converting our body over here to JSON stringify and enclose our data under this method. Also, we will be parsing our body, so let's do that over here. We'll call it data body, and for this we'll use json.parse in order to parse the JSON body from the request. So this way we are converting our data into JSON string when we are sending a fetch request, as well as we are parsing it back again since we are sending a request from our client side using fetch. So we will also convert the string to JSON stringify on the client side, and also instead of sending the role and content direct like this, we will also convert it into an object and assign it a property of message, and then we will convert it again. Let's add colon over here. We will then convert this into a stringify. Let's format our code and save this on the client side. Also, we will convert our prompt into a single line in order to avoid any \n and empty spaces. Let's save this. And now since we have converted our JSON into string over here and assigned a message property over here, we will also have to grab this message property at our backend. So let's go back there, and from this data body we have to use message over here. So we'll do it like this. Click on save. And once again, when we'll send our fetch request and receive a response, the response won't be available instantly. So we'll be using asynchronous await in order to get the response before it is being sent to the front end. So let's do that by using async for the response. And over here we'll be using a constant data response, and using await we will wait for the response.json. In this way we will get the JSON response from our response, and we will be using this data response property to send the data back to our front end. And on this data response we will be having property called choices, and inside that choices property there would be another property called message. So let me do this thing. First of all, let me call choices, and over that we will be having message. So let's do this. And also over here we have this wrong message over here. We have to send request of type 400 when an error occurs. So with this, let's save this. Also in our authorization header we will be converting it to string, as well as we will add one more string over here, that is content type, and we'll make it application JSON. Let's save this, and also we'll be using array of first index for our choices to send the message. And on our client side where we have our response, we'll be converting it to JSON, but let's first log this response body and save this. Let's now start our server once again. And now if we go back to our browser and type in who are you and check the network tab over here, let's increase the height, and if we check the response, you can see that the content says I am a Udemy AI based support system, which is the message that we have sent it initially from our message and answer domain, and the role type is assistant. So with that we have a good response over here. Let's see what is the response over here. So we have readable stream over here, so let's convert that first. And in order to do that, we will convert our then function to async function. We'll use async keyword over here, and over here we will have a constant called response data, and it will contain response and use promise from response, that is JSON, in order to get the response out of our response. We'll log this response data on our console. So let's log this and save this, and we'll see if our terminal is running fine. So let's close this and let's run our server once again. With that being done, let's now type in our message over here, and we have a message. Let's see what's the response. So we have our promise and it's not yet resolved because we have not used await over here. So let's write await over here, save this. Let's start once again, and now we have a success message as well as we have our data back, and the content says I am a Udemy AI based support system. So now we have to add this data response into our message list, and we are good to go with that. So let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. Now where we are getting our response data, we'll create a new message object over here, and in this we'll have our message equals to response data.content. Similarly, we have user type instead of role, so let's convert our response to user type instead of role by using response data.role property. Also we'll add one more property, that is created at, which would be the new date. Once the data is ready, now we'll get the latest state for our messages and call it updated messages. And inside this updated messages, we'll add our new message. So let's do that. We can also do this upside over here like this, and spread this over here, and we can set the messages by using set messages function and pass the updated messages over here. So let's save this and check if we can see the new messages over there in our UI. So let's refresh this and write once again. So we have an error which states that message is not defined. Let's check what's the case for it. And inside our message box container, we have this error at line number 21. So let's see what's the error. So on our client side, we need to fix two things. First of all, our response data should have one more property, that is data. Since we have two fields over there in our response, first is data and second is success, we will use data over here as well. We need to get the role and content from our data. So that's one fix. Another fix is our state is not yet updated, since we have updated messages over here and we set our messages over here and we are using it immediately over here. So it won't work like this, and we won't have to use this let over here. Instead of this, what we will be doing is we will use updated messages over here directly from the top and use those updated messages that we have added right now, the one that user typed in. We will use that and append the response over there with it. Alright, so this should fix it, and let's confirm that once again. We can also remove this console log for now. Let's save this. Also, we have a typo in our message box, so let's fix that as well. Go to ChatBot message container, and over here we need to fix the spelling for our message. Let's fix this. Similarly over here, and also in our message. Let's save this, restart our server once again. Now let's go back to our browser, and over here we will type in our message, who are you? And we will receive a response from our chatbot. It says, I am Udemy's AI based support system, which is good, and our chatbot works in an automated way. Also, if we type in some message which brings in more results for us, then in that case our message box UI might be distorted and we need to fix that. So let's type in some message which brings in lot of data. So let's type something like, what is this course? And you can see that the message is really large and the message box is overlapped. So let's fix that first. So inside our chatbot message container, we will give our message boxes a fixed width of, let's say, 50 by using width 50. Similarly over here, width 50. Also right now we have margin top 3 only on our receiver message. Let's add it to our sender message as well. With that it should work totally fine. Let's restart our server once again. Apart from this, we can make our chat prompt more helpful and guide the user on how they should enter their messages. And we'll do that by using message. We'll write some generic messages like, how may I help you? And the user type would be assistant. Also we'll add the created date. We'll add a comma over here. We'll also copy this message in order to add some more messages. Let's format this code to make it more readable. Let's save this and see if we start the server once again. You can see that now when we go to our chatbot, we see some default messages. Even though we refresh our application, we'll see these messages. And if we type in, and you can see that the message is returned saying that AI means artificial intelligence. So with that, we are done with this video and you are almost there. You have a simple chatbot. And you can continue further in this application by simply adding the timeout and stuff like showing error messages, waiting for AI messages, and showing a bubble over here with 3 dots or something like that, a loader or anything that provides user with necessary information that the prompt is typing. You can also train your AI ChatGPT training model by typing in more senseful and meaningful prompt messages. And you can add in more messages in order to train the AI bot. So let's move on to our next video and start with our new and latest project. So see you guys in the next.